The rifle was heavier than she remembered. Mara Calloway's hand shook as she aimed it at the 5 men surrounding her porch, their torches casting shadows across land her husband had died trying to keep. 6 months of silence, 6 months of grief. And now this. Silas Vane's ultimatum echoed in her ears, signed by Dawn, or we take it anyway. But the stranger fixing her fence line had just stepped into view, and something in his eyes said he wasn't the running type. Some wars choose you. Stay with me till the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. The Montana Territory had a way of making widows out of married women and ghosts out of the living. Mara Calloway had become both. She stood in the barn doorway at first light, watching frost crawl across the valley like a slow-moving plague. 6 months. That's how long Thomas had been in the ground. 6 months since the fever took him in 3 days flat, turning a man who could wrestle a bull into something fragile and gasping. She'd held his hand until it went cold. Then she'd buried him on the hill overlooking the creek, beneath the cottonwood where he'd proposed. The ranch hadn't stopped dying just because she was still breathing. 30 head of cattle left from a herd of 80. Half the fencing down. The North Pasture lease payment overdue by 2 months. Water rights Tom had spent 5 years securing now hanging by legal threads she didn't understand. And the vultures circling, not the kind with wings, but the kind with land deeds and lawyers and smiles that never reached their eyes. Silas Vane, chief among them. She kicked at the barn door, felt the satisfying crack of wood against wood, immediately regretted it when pain shot through her boot. Stupid. Everything lately felt stupid. Her decisions, her hope, the stubborn refusal to admit what everyone from town already knew. A woman alone wouldn't last the winter. You planning to knock that door clean off or just threaten it? Mara spun, hand instinctively dropping to the knife at her belt. The man stood 20 feet back near the fence line she'd been meaning to fix for 3 weeks. Tall, lean in that way that spoke of hard living rather than hunger. Dark hair needed cutting. Face weathered but not old. Maybe 35. Maybe 40, hard to tell with men who'd spent their lives outside. He wore a dusty coat, a hat with a brim that had seen better decades, and had the kind of stillness that made you notice when he moved. Didn't mean to startle you. His voice carried easy, no challenge in it. Saw the fence was down. Took the liberty. She looked past him. 3 posts straightened, wire pulled tight, the kind of work that should have taken her half a day done in what? An hour? Less? I didn't ask for help. No, ma'am, you didn't. He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture so old-fashioned it felt like something from her grandfather's time. Name's Rhett Dalton. I'm not looking for charity, just a place to work, food, and a corner to sleep, that's all. I don't have money for hired hands. Didn't ask for money. Mara studied him. She'd gotten good at reading men since Tom died, the ones who looked at the ranch and saw opportunity, the ones who looked at her and saw weakness, the ones who looked at both and saw prey. This one was different. He looked at the fence like it was a problem to solve, and at her like she was a person who might or might not have the answer. Where'd you come from? North. That's not an answer. It's the one I got. She should have sent him away. Should have grabbed the rifle leaning inside the barn door and told him to keep moving. Strange men showing up out of nowhere. Nothing good came from that, but her hands ached from the work she'd done yesterday and would do tomorrow, and every day after until something broke. The fence, the cattle, her. Maybe him staying one night wouldn't hurt. Bunkhouse is around back, she heard herself say. Hasn't been used since my husband died. Probably got mice, definitely got dust. I've slept worse places. I expect work, real work, not just fence mending. Yes, ma'am. And if you steal anything, I won't. The certainty in his voice almost made her believe him. Almost. Supper's at 6. You're late. You don't eat. She turned back toward the house before he could respond, before she could second-guess the decision that was probably going to get her robbed or killed or both. But when she glanced back from the porch, he was already walking toward the next section of fence, tools in hand, moving like a man who knew what he was about. The house felt emptier when she stepped inside. It always did. Rhett Dalton worked like a man trying to outrun something. By noon, he'd fixed 8 fence posts, cleared the debris from the water trough, and rehung the barn door that had been dragging for 2 months. Mara watched from the kitchen window, bread dough forgotten under her hands. He moved efficient, no wasted motion. When the gray mare, skittish since Tom died, tried to bite him, he sidestepped without flinching and kept working. She kneaded the dough harder than necessary. At one point, he disappeared into the barn. She tensed, hand moving toward the rifle she'd started keeping close. But he emerged 10 minutes later with the old scythe Tom had meant to sharpen last spring, testing the blade against his thumb. By the time she brought water out at 3, he'd cleared half the overgrown north field. "You trying to finish 6 months of work in one day?" She set the bucket down, ladle hooked over the edge. He straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Trying to earn my keep." One night's keep doesn't require destroying yourself. Habit. He drank deep, water running down his chin. "Thank you for this." She nodded, collected the bucket, walked back. At the porch, she paused. "You got a reason you're out here? In the middle of nowhere, working for free?" His expression didn't change. "Same reason as anyone. Needed somewhere to be that wasn't where I was." Cryptic bastard, but she let it go. Supper was salt pork, beans, and bread that had turned out better than expected. Mara set 2 places at the kitchen table, then thought better of it and moved his plate to the small table on the back porch. No sense getting familiar. He appeared at 6 exactly, hat in hand, clean despite the day's work. She pointed to the porch. He sat without comment. They ate in silence, broken only by crickets and the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. She found herself listening for his footsteps, the clink of his fork, small sounds that reminded her the ranch wasn't entirely empty anymore. When he finished, he brought the plate to the door. "Thank you, Mrs. Calloway. That was fine." "It's just beans." "I've had worse beans." Almost a smile in his voice. Almost. "You do good work," she said, the words coming harder than they should. "If you want to stay on a few more days, I can offer the same. Food, bunk, no wages." "Appreciate it. But I need to know, are you running from the law?" He met her eyes. "No, ma'am." "From a woman?" "No." "Then what?" A long pause. Somewhere in the dark, an owl called. "From who I used to be." She waited for more. Got nothing. "All right then. Be ready to work at dawn." He nodded and disappeared into the darkness toward the bunkhouse. Mara stood on the porch long after he'd gone, staring at the hill where Tom lay buried. The moon was bright enough to see the cottonwood silhouette. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the empty air. The wind didn't answer. 3 days became a week, became 2. Rhett never asked questions, never pushed, just worked from dawn till dark, fixed what was broken, strengthened what was weak. The ranch began to look less like a dying dream and more like something sustainable, not thriving, not yet, but standing. Mara caught herself relying on him, checking where he was working, listening for his footsteps in the morning. Once, she made extra coffee and brought it out without thinking, found him already up, examining the wagon wheel that had been wobbling for months. "Bearing's shot," he said, accepting the cup. "But I can rig something temporary." "How do you know how to do all this?" "Grew up on a ranch, learned young." He sipped the coffee. "This is good." "It's just coffee." "I've had worse coffee." This time she definitely caught the hint of a smile. "You always so economical with words?" she asked. "You always so suspicious of help?" "Only when help shows up out of nowhere and works for nothing." "Fair enough." He set down the cup, returned to the wheel. "My father used to say trust takes time. Suspicion's just good sense dressed up as rudeness." "Your father sounds wise." "He was a drunk who beat my mother." Rhett's voice stayed level. "But he had his moments." Mara didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, collected the cup, went back inside. But something shifted in that moment, a small crack in the wall she'd built between them. That night, she set his supper at the kitchen table instead of the porch. He noticed, didn't comment, just sat down across from her like it had always been this way. Well, the trouble started on a Tuesday. Mara was in town buying supplies she couldn't afford when she saw Jack Brennan waiting by her wagon. Vane's foreman. A thick-necked man with small eyes and the kind of smile that made you want to check your pockets after he walked past. Mrs. Calloway. He touched his hat with mock courtesy. Been meaning to ride out, see how you're managing. Managing fine. She loaded the sack of flowers she'd just bought on credit she'd probably never repay. That's so. He glanced at the meager supplies. Heard you took on a drifter. That true? Word traveled fast in small towns. Hired some help. That's my business. Course it is, course it is. Brennan leaned against the wagon, too close. Just seems like a lot of expense for a ranch that's underwater. Mr. Vane's still interested in that northern section, water rights especially. Could solve a lot of problems for you. I'm not selling. He's prepared to be generous. I said no. Brennan's smile thinned. Stubbornness is expensive, Mrs. Calloway. Winter's coming. Cattle need feed. Land needs tending. You got one man and pride keeping you afloat. That's not a business plan. That's a prayer. Then I guess I better start praying. She climbed onto the wagon seat before he could respond, snapped the reins harder than necessary. The horses jerked forward. In the mirror, she saw Brennan watching, that smile completely gone. Her hands didn't stop shaking until she was 2 miles out of town. Rhett was working the south fence when she returned. He helped unload without being asked, noticed her tension without commenting. But when she dropped the flour sack and it split across the porch, spilling white across the boards, he caught her shoulder before she could curse and throw something. What happened? Nothing, just clumsy. Mara. First time he'd used her name, it stopped her. What happened? She told him about Brennan, about Vane's continued interest, about the pressure that had been building since Tom died, the quiet threats disguised as neighborly concern. Rhett listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring at the spilled flour like it held answers. This Vane, he said finally. He's serious? He owns half the valley, wants the other half. And your water rights are the key. Tom fought for those. Spent 5 years in legal battles. I'm not handing them over because some land baron decides it's convenient. Rhett nodded slowly. Then we make sure he knows you're not going anywhere. We? He met her eyes. I'm not much for running anymore. Something in the way he said it made her think he'd done plenty of running before. But whatever had brought him here, whatever he was hiding from, right now he was choosing to stay. Why? She asked. Why would you fight for land that's not yours? Because it's yours. And you're not wrong to hold it. He bent, started gathering the spilled flour with his hands. Besides, I've got nowhere better to be. It wasn't a declaration of loyalty. Wasn't poetry. But standing there on her broken porch, watching a near stranger clean up her mess, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in 6 months. Not quite hope, but close enough. That night, she dreamed of fire. Tom's face appeared in the flames, mouth moving, words she couldn't hear. She woke gasping, sheets tangled, moonlight cutting through the window. The clock read 3 a.m. She pulled on her robe and walked to the kitchen, found Rhett already there, sitting in the dark. Can't sleep either? He asked. She poured water from the pitcher, drank it standing. Bad dreams. Those'll haunt you. He had a knife in his hands, a piece of wood, shavings curling into his lap. Nervous habit, she guessed. Something to do with restless hands. You dream about what you're running from? He paused, mid-cut. Sometimes. Want to tell me what it is? Not particularly. Fair enough. She sat down across from him. But if it's going to show up on my doorstep looking for you, I'd prefer a warning. It won't. He said it with certainty. What I'm running from already caught me. I'm just learning to live with the scars. That sounds like experience talking. It is. They sat in silence. His hands moved steady, the knife peeling away thin layers of wood, revealing something underneath. She couldn't tell what he was carving yet. Maybe he didn't know either. My husband, she said quietly. He used to sit right there, after a hard day. Just sit and think. She traced the wood grain with her finger. I used to find it irritating. Like, speak or go to bed, but now... You miss the silence. I miss him filling it. Rhett nodded. My wife used to hum. Drove me crazy. Off key. All the time. Didn't matter what she was doing. Cooking, mending, just existing. He set down the knife. Been 3 years. I can still hear it sometimes. Mara looked up. You're married? Was. She's gone. The way he said gone made it clear he didn't mean left. Mara felt her throat tighten. I'm sorry. Me too. Another silence, but this one felt different. Shared grief had a weight to it, a gravity that pulled people together even when they wanted to stay apart. This Vane situation, Rhett said, changing the subject with the subtlety of a hammer. How far is he willing to go? I don't know, legal pressure mostly, but Brennan... She hesitated. There are stories. A rancher south of here lost his cattle to a mysterious illness right before Vane bought him out. Another family's barn burned down. Could be coincidence. Could be a pattern. That's what scares me. Rhett picked up the knife again, turned the wood in his hands. Then we don't wait for him to make the first move. We prepare like it's coming. How? Secure what we can, document everything, make allies if possible, and... He met her eyes. We make it clear you're not alone. I am alone. Not anymore. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Mara felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, maybe never, but recognition of another scarred soul who'd decided to stand when running was easier. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. If trouble's coming, I'm probably going to make it worse. Worse how? He smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. I'm real good at solving problems with the wrong tools. She should have asked what he meant, should have pressed for the truth about his past, about the skills he clearly had, about why a man who carved wood at 3 a.m. with the precision of someone who'd held weapons spoke about violence like an old friend. But she didn't, because right then she needed someone good at solving problems more than she needed all the answers. The first cut fence appeared 3 days later. Rhett found it at dawn, 50 feet of wire snipped clean, 6 head of cattle wandered onto Vane's property. By the time Mara reached him, he'd already started repairs, jaw set, working with angry efficiency. This wasn't an accident, he said. No. She stared at the clean cuts. Professional, deliberate. It wasn't. You want to report it? To who? The sheriff? She laughed bitterly. He plays poker with Vane every Thursday. I'd get sympathy and a paperwork. Maybe a promise to look into it. Nothing else. Rhett finished the repair, tested the tension. Then we documented ourselves. Photos if we can, written records at minimum, build a pattern. For what? For when we need proof. He started walking the fence line. They'll do it again. Men like this always do. They escalate until you break or fight back. And if I fight back? He stopped, looked at her straight. Then things get messy. Mara watched him, this quiet man who worked her land like he owned it and talked about conflict like he'd studied it. You're not just a ranch hand, are you? No. What are you? Long pause. Wind cut across the field, carrying the smell of grass and distance. Someone who knows how this goes. Someone who's seen good people lose because they played fair against people who didn't. He turned back to the fence. Someone who's tired of seeing it. That's not an answer. It's the one you get today. She wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth, but his hands on the wire were white-knuckled, and something in his posture said he was holding himself together with effort. So she let it go. For now. They found 2 more cut fences that week, lost another 4 head of cattle. Then the water pump broke. Not broke, was broken. Someone had thrown sand in the gears, seized the whole mechanism. Cost 3 days and money she didn't have to fix. Rhett started sleeping light. Mara saw the lamp in the bunkhouse at odd hours, saw him checking the perimeter at midnight, at 3 a.m., at dawn. He was waiting for something. It came on a Saturday. 5 men rode up at noon, Brennan leading. Mara was in the garden. Rhett was shoeing a horse in the barn. She saw them coming and felt her stomach drop. Mrs. Calloway! Brennan's voice carried false cheer. Got a minute? She wiped dirt from her hands, walked to meet them, didn't invite them to dismount. What do you want, Jack? Just being neighborly. Heard you've been having trouble. Fences cut, cattle wandering. Terrible shame. His smile was all teeth. Mr. Vane's concerned, wants to renew his offer. Fair price, cash payment. Save you a lot of headache. I'm not selling. Ma'am, With all respect, you can't afford not to. Winter feed alone is going to bankrupt you. And these accidents, he spread his hands. Who knows what might happen next? That a threat? Just an observation. Red appeared from the barn carrying a hammer. Didn't say anything. Just stood there, tool in hand, eyes on Brennan. One of the other men, a scarred kid with quick hands, tensed. Who's this? Hired help, Mara said. Awful lot of muscle for a failing ranch. Rhett smiled, and it was the coldest thing Mara had ever seen. Awful lot of riders for a friendly visit. Tension crackled like summer lightning. Brennan's hand drifted toward his belt. The other men shifted in their saddles. Mara felt the moment balanced on a knife's edge, ready to tip into violence. Gentlemen, she stepped forward, breaking the line of sight. You've delivered your message. I've given my answer. Time for you to leave. Brennan's eyes went flat. You're making a mistake. That's my right. Rights don't mean much out here. You should know that by now. Then I guess we'll see who's tougher. Me and my rights, or you and your threats. She pointed toward the road. Get off my land. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Brennan laughed, a sound without humor, and pulled his horse around. Your funeral, Mrs. Calloway. Don't say we didn't warn you. They rode out slow, deliberate, making sure the message was clear. Mara stood frozen until they were out of sight, then her knees went weak. Rhett caught her elbow. You all right? No? Her voice shook. That was stupid. I just made everything worse. No, you drew a line. He guided her to the porch, sat her down. They needed to see you wouldn't fold. Now they know. Now they'll come harder. Probably. He sat beside her. Which is why we need help. What kind of help? The kind that makes this a harder target. He looked at her. You got neighbors? Anyone Tom was friendly with? The Andersons, maybe, couple others, but they've got their own problems. Everybody's got problems. Question is whether they've got principles. He stood. I'll ride out tomorrow. Talk to them. See if we can build something. Build what? Alliance. Watch system. Mutual protection. Make it clear that you're not isolated. He headed toward the barn. In the meantime, we arm up and sleep light. Rhett. He stopped. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He glanced back and his expression was grim. This is going to get worse before it gets better. You need to be ready for that. I know. But she didn't. Not really. That night, Mara loaded Tom's rifle and set it beside her bed. She lay awake listening to the house settle, to the wind against the windows, to every sound that might be footsteps. Around midnight, she heard movement outside, tensed, then recognized Rhett's silhouette making rounds. She pulled on her robe and went out, found him by the well staring at the dark horizon. Can't sleep? She asked. Learned not to. He didn't look at her. Spent 2 years sleeping with one eye open. Hard habit to break. 2 years where? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, after my wife died, I went somewhere else. Became someone else. Did things that needed doing but left marks. He finally looked at her. I was a lawman. Federal marshal. Good at it, too. Until I wasn't. Mara's breath caught. What happened? I stopped seeing people as people. Started seeing problems to solve, threats to eliminate. My wife, Emma, she kept me human. When she died, He trailed off. I crossed lines. Legal ones, moral ones. By the time I realized what I'd become, I couldn't go back. So you ran. So I ran. He smiled without humor. Been running for 3 years. Different towns, different names, different work. Trying to figure out who I am when I'm not wearing a badge and a gun. And who is that? Still figuring it out. He turned to face her fully. But I know this. I'm done running from fights that matter. Your fight matters. This land, your right to it, standing against men who think power means they can take whatever they want. That matters. Mara felt tears burn her eyes. I'm scared. Good. Scared means you're paying attention. Are we going to die doing this? Maybe. He said it plainly, no false comfort. But we might not. And even if we do, we'll die standing. That counts for something. She wanted to argue. wanted to say survival mattered more than pride. But standing there in the dark, facing a man who'd lost everything and chosen to fight anyway, she couldn't find the words. "Tell me we have a chance," she said instead. "We have a chance." He said it firmly. "Vane's used to people folding. He's not ready for a real fight. That's our advantage. One advantage against his money, his men, his connections. Sometimes one advantage is enough." She wanted to believe him, chose to believe him, because the alternative was surrender, and she'd buried enough already. "Teach me," she said. "Teach you what?" "To fight, really fight, not just wave a rifle around and hope." She met his eyes. "If this is coming, I need to be ready." Rhett studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, tomorrow. We start training." That night, Mara dreamed of fire again, but this time she wasn't running from it. She was walking through it, rifle in hand, and she wasn't afraid. Dawn came cold and unforgiving, the kind of morning that made your joints ache before you even moved. Mara was already awake, had been for an hour, coffee growing cold in her cup as she stared at Tom's rifle propped against the kitchen wall. Her hand still remembered the weight of it from last night, the way her finger had rested against the trigger guard while she listened to shadows that might have been threats. Rhett appeared at the door before she could call him, boots already dusty like he'd been up even longer. "You ready?" "For what?" "You didn't say what we're doing." "Teaching you to shoot properly and fight dirty." He tilted his head toward the barn. "Bring the rifle." They walked out past the corral to a clearing Tom had used for target practice. Rhett had already set up, tin cans on fence posts, marks scratched in the dirt to show distance. Professional, like he'd done this 100 times before. "Show me what you know," he said. Mara lifted the rifle, sighted down the barrel at the nearest can. Squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked loud across the morning, and the can flew backward, hit clean. "Not bad." Rhett walked to the fence, reset the can. "Now do it again, faster." She fired, missed. The can sat there mocking her. "Again." "Miss." "Again." This time she hit it, but her shoulder was already aching from the recoil, her hands starting to shake. "Problem is, you're thinking too much." Rhett moved beside her, adjusted her stance. His hands were impersonal, efficient. "This isn't about perfect aim. It's about muscle memory. Your body needs to know what to do before your brain catches up." "That doesn't make sense." "It will when someone's charging you, and you've got 2 seconds to decide if you're going to die." He stepped back. "Empty the rifle, all 5 rounds. Don't think, just shoot." She did, hit 3 out of 5. "Better. Now reload." Her fingers fumbled with the cartridges, dropped one in the dirt. "Pick it up, try again." By the 10th reload, her hands moved smoother. By the 20th, she could do it without looking. The sun climbed higher, sweat soaked through her shirt, and Rhett never let up. When she complained her shoulder hurt, he showed her how to brace better. When she said she was tired, he told her tired didn't matter when you were fighting for your life. "You're mean," she said, wiping her forehead. "I'm realistic." He handed her a canteen. "Mean would be letting you think you're ready when you're not. Vane's men won't give you breaks to reload. Won't wait for you to aim proper. You need to be fast and accurate under pressure. I'm a rancher, not a gunfighter. Right now you need to be both." He picked up a stick, drew lines in the dirt. "Fighting's not just about shooting. It's about thinking 3 moves ahead. They come at you. What do you do? Shoot them? What if you miss? What if there's 2 of them? 3? What if you're reloading?" He tapped the dirt with the stick. "You need fallbacks, cover positions, escape routes, ways to make them come at you on your terms, not theirs." They spent the next hour walking the property, Rhett pointing out sight lines, defensible positions, weak points. He talked strategy like some men talked weather, casual but thorough. Mara's head spun, trying to remember it all. "This is too much," she said. "It's survival." He stopped by the barn, looked at her straight. "You asked me to teach you. This is what it takes. Not pretty, not comfortable, just real." She wanted to quit, wanted to go back to the house, pretend this was all unnecessary, that Brennan's visit had been posturing and nothing more. But the cut fences said otherwise. The broken pump said otherwise. The way those 5 men had sat their horses, radiating threat, said otherwise. Okay. She straightened her spine. What else? Something shifted in Rhett's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Hand to hand. If it comes down to close quarters, you need basics. I'm half your size. Doesn't matter. Size helps, but speed and surprise count for more. He moved into the open space. Come at me. What? Pretend I'm Brennan. Come at me like you mean it. Mara hesitated, then rushed him. Rhett sidestepped, caught her arm, redirected her momentum into the dirt. She hit hard, air knocked out of her lungs. See? You telegraphed the whole thing. Eyes, shoulders, feet, everything said what you were going to do before you did it. He offered a hand, pulled her up. Try again. This time, fake one direction, go another. They drilled for another hour. Mara hit the dirt so many times she lost count, until her body was bruised and her pride was worse. But gradually, she started reading his movements, started understanding the geometry of violence, angles, leverage, weak points. Good. Rhett stepped back, breathing harder now. You're learning. I'm dying. Same thing out here. But he smiled when he said it, just a flicker. Break for water, then we go again. Mara collapsed against the fence, every muscle screaming. You really think this'll make a difference? I think when they come, not if, when, you'll have a better chance than you did yesterday. That's all we can do. Make tomorrow's odds better than today's. And what are the odds right now? Rhett was quiet, staring toward the road that led to town. Honestly? Not great. But I've beaten worse odds. When? Leadville, 3 years back. His voice went distant. Town was under siege by a mining company trying to force workers off their land. Company had private guards, lawyers, politicians. Workers had families and stubbornness. He paused. I was supposed to keep the peace. Instead, I chose a side. What happened? We won. Barely. Lost good people doing it. He looked at her. That's when I learned something important. You can't win clean against people who fight dirty. You can only win ugly and try to live with yourself after. The weight in his words settled between them. Mara thought about what ugly might mean, what lines she'd have to cross, what pieces of herself she'd have to shed to keep this land. I don't want to become like them, she said quietly. You won't, because you're asking that question. Rhett pushed off the fence. They never did. Before Mara could respond, hoofbeats echoed from the road. Both of them tensed. Rhett's hand dropped to his belt, where a knife hung. When had he started carrying that? But he relaxed when an old farm wagon appeared, driven by a weathered man in his 60s. That's Carl Anderson, Mara said. Neighbor to the east. Carl pulled up, tipped his hat. Mara, heard you had some trouble. Word travels. Always does. He glanced at Rhett. This the fella Brennan was complaining about in town? I'm Rhett Dalton. Rhett didn't offer his hand, just stood there measuring. Carl Anderson. Been ranching this valley since before you were born, son. Carl turned back to Mara. Brennan's been talking, says you're stirring up trouble, refusing reasonable offers, bringing in hired guns. I'm not stirring anything. And Rhett's not... I know what he's not. Carl spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Also know what Vane is. Been watching him swallow up land for 10 years now. He gets yours, mine's next. So I got a question. He looked between them. You planning to fold, or you planning to fight? Mara felt her heartbeat in her throat. Fight. Good. Carl nodded once. Then you got allies. Me, the Hendersons, probably the Yates family, if we ask right. We've been waiting for someone to stand up. Tom would have, but he trailed off. Anyway, you need help, you call. We'll come. Relief hit Mara so hard she almost stumbled. Thank you, Carl. I can't thank you. Don't thank me yet. This gets ugly. Some of us might not make it through. He gathered his reins. But I'd rather go down fighting than live on my knees. After he left, Mara turned to Rhett. That's something, right? That helps? It helps. He was already calculating. She could see it in his eyes. 4 ranches together, we can cover more ground, pool resources. Make it expensive for Vane to push. He started walking toward the house. We need to meet with them. Soon. Get organized. Organized how? Watch rotations, communication signals, shared supplies. Quick response if anyone's hit. He grabbed paper from the kitchen, started sketching a rough map of the valley. Anderson's here, you're here. If we coordinate properly, you've done this before, Mara said. Built a resistance. More than once. Rhett didn't look up from the map. Miners in Leadville, homesteaders in Kansas, small ranchers in Wyoming, same story, different dirt. Big money tries to take what small folks have. Small folks either band together or die alone. And how many times did the small folks win? He finally met her eyes, twice out of 5. That's not encouraging. It's honest. He went back to the map. Difference is, those other times we were reactive, defending. This time we get proactive. We don't wait for Vane to make his move, we make ours. What kind of move? The kind that puts him on notice, shows him this won't be easy. Rhett tapped the paper. But first we need that meeting. Get everyone aligned. Can you arrange it? I can try. Do better than try. We've got maybe a week before he escalates. Rhett looked out the window toward the road. Clock's ticking. That night, Mara rode out to 3 neighboring ranches, extended invitations for a meeting at her place in 2 days. The Hendersons agreed immediately. They'd lost a barn to lightning last year, though no storm had passed through. The Yates were hesitant, but came around when Mara mentioned Carl Anderson was in. By the time she returned home, it was past midnight, and her body felt like it had been dragged behind a horse. Rhett was still awake, sitting on the porch with that piece of wood he'd been carving. She could see it better now in the lamplight, a bird taking flight, wings spread, surprisingly delicate. It's beautiful, she said. He turned it over in his hands. Emma used to say I had gentle fingers for a violent man. Never knew if that was a compliment or an accusation. Maybe both. Probably. He set it aside. Meetings arranged? Day after tomorrow, noon. Good. He stood, stretched. Mara heard his joints pop. You should sleep. Tomorrow we keep training. More shooting. More everything. You're getting better, but better won't cut it if they come in force. Mara climbed the porch steps, paused beside him. Rhett, those times the small folks didn't win. What happened to them? He was quiet for a long moment. They lost their land. Some lost more than that. And you? What did you lose? Pieces of myself I didn't know were missing till they were gone. He looked at her, and in the lamplight his scars seemed deeper. That's the cost of fighting, Mara. Win or lose, you pay. Question is whether what you're fighting for is worth the price. This land is worth it. I believe you. He picked up the carving, examined it in the light. Just make sure you still believe it when the bill comes due. He walked off toward the bunkhouse, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts and the weight of what was coming. She touched the rifle leaning against the wall, felt the cool metal under her palm, and wondered what pieces of herself she'd have to leave behind to keep standing. The next 2 days blurred together in a haze of preparation. More shooting drills until Mara could reload blind and hit moving targets. More hand-to-hand until her reflexes sharpened, her hesitation dulled. Rhett pushed her past exhaustion into something harder. That space where your body kept moving because your will demanded it, even when everything hurt. They also worked the ranch, fixed more fence, moved the cattle closer to the house, set up sight lines and cleared brush that could provide cover for anyone approaching. Turned the property into something between a working ranch and a fortress. This is paranoid, Mara said, dragging another pile of brush to the burn pile. Paranoid keeps you alive. Rhett was on the barn roof, securing loose shingles. Complacent gets you buried. You're just full of cheerful wisdom. Comes with the scars. The morning of the meeting, Mara woke before dawn to find Rhett already cooking breakfast. Eggs, bacon, coffee strong enough to strip paint. He moved around her kitchen like he'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. You didn't have to do this, she said. You need to eat. Big day. He slid a plate in front of her. Anderson and the others, they're going to look to you. You're Tom's widow. This is your land, your fight. You need to lead. I'm not a leader. You stood up to Brennan with 5 armed men on your property. You're training to fight instead of running. You organized this meeting. He poured coffee. You're already leading. Now you just need to own it. Mara picked at the eggs, stomach too twisted to properly eat. What if they say no? What if they decide it's too risky? Then we're back to you and me against Vane. Same as before. Rhett sat across from her. But they won't say no. They're coming because they already decided. They just need someone to make it official. How do you know? Because people are tired of being afraid. They're tired of watching bullies win. Give them a chance to fight back. Most will take it. He sipped his coffee. The ones who won't weren't going to help anyway. At noon, 4 wagons pulled into the yard. Carl Anderson came first, followed by Robert Henderson and his 2 grown sons. Sarah Yates arrived with her husband Marcus, both looking grim and determined. Last came a surprise, James Cole, who ran a small spread to the south and had a reputation for keeping to himself. "Didn't expect you, James," Mara said as they gathered in the barn, out of the sun. "Didn't expect to come." Cole was a thin man with hard eyes. "But Vane's agent approached me last week, made it clear my cooperation was expected. Don't much like being told what's expected of me." "Then we're all here for the same reason." Mara looked around the circle. 7 ranchers, 8 counting Rhett, all watching her, waiting. She felt the weight of their attention, the responsibility of what came next. Rhett stood to the side, not inserting himself. This was her moment. "Thank you for coming," she started, then stopped, cleared her throat, started again. "Vane has been picking us off one by one, buying some out, pressuring others, making life impossible until we fold. He wants this valley consolidated under his control, and every ranch he takes makes the rest of us weaker." "We know all this," Henderson said. "Not hostile, just impatient. Question is what we do about it." "We stand together." Mara's voice strengthened. "We watch each other's property, share resources, document everything, make it clear that an attack on one is an attack on all." "That's a nice speech," Sarah Yates said. "But what's it mean practically? My husband and I can't be in 2 places at once. We got our own land to tend." "Rotation system," Rhett spoke up, moving to the map he'd drawn. 2-person teams. Each ranch gets a 4-hour watch at night. Someone sees trouble, they fire 3 shots. Everyone within earshot comes running. "That's asking a lot," Marcus Yates said. "It is." Rhett didn't soften it. "But it's better than waiting for your barn to burn or your cattle to disappear. This way, we make it expensive for them. They hit one of us, they get all of us." "And during the day?" Cole asked. "We keep our regular routines but stay alert. Check in with each other every morning. Anything unusual gets reported." Rhett pointed to different sections of the map. "We're spread out, but not so far we can't support each other. 15 minutes on horseback, less if you push." Carl Anderson leaned forward, studying the map. "Communication's the weak point. Gunshots work at night, but during the day, with work noise, distance, we might not hear." "Mirrors," Rhett said. "Simple signal system. Flash pattern means different things. 3 quick flashes is trouble. 2 long means all clear. We set up positions on high ground, relay messages ranch to ranch." Henderson's older son, Daniel, nodded slowly. "That could work. We got that ridge overlooks both our place and Anderson's." "And we got the hill by the creek," Sarah added. "Could see Mara's place and yours, Daniel." The conversation shifted, people leaning in, pointing at the map, working out details. Mara watched it happen, saw the moment when it stopped being her fight and became their fight. Something tight in her chest loosened. "There's something else," she said, and everyone quieted. "Legal approach. We need to document everything. Every threat, every damaged fence, every suspicious incident, build a case." "For who?" Cole's voice dripped skepticism. "Sheriff's in Vane's pocket. Judge too, probably." "For federal authorities," Rhett said. "If we can show a pattern of intimidation, land theft, violence, territorial governor might take interest. At minimum, it creates a record. Makes it harder for Vane to claim everything was legal and proper." "That's a long shot," Henderson said. "It is," Mara agreed. "But we play every angle. Legal, practical, defensive. We make ourselves too expensive to crush quietly." Silence stretched as everyone processed. Then Carl Anderson stood, extended his hand to Mara. "I'm in, all the way." One by one, the others stood too, shook hands, made the commitment. By the time they left an hour later, they had watch schedules, signal systems, supply agreements. They had a plan. Mara stood in the yard watching the last wagon disappear, felt Rhett come up beside her. "You did good," he said. "We did good." She looked at him. This doesn't work without you. Sure it does. You're stronger than you think. Maybe. But I'm glad I don't have to find out. She started toward the house, paused. Rhett, when this is over, win or lose, what happens to you? He didn't answer right away, just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the horizon. Haven't thought that far ahead. You're a terrible liar. Yeah, a ghost of a smile. I am. That night they started the first watch rotation. Henderson's boys took the early shift. Cole and his hired hand took middle. Carl Anderson and his son-in-law took late. Rhett positioned himself to back up any position if needed, riding circuit between locations. Mara stayed home, rifle close, jumping at every sound. Around 3 a.m., she heard hoofbeats and nearly shot Rhett when he appeared at the door. Just me, he said, hands up. All quiet. Thought I'd check on you. I'm fine. Terrified, but fine. That's normal. He leaned against the doorframe. First night's always hardest. Your mind conjures threats from every shadow. Does it get easier? No, you just get better at functioning scared. That's not comforting. Not meant to be. Meant to be true. He straightened. Try to sleep. Tomorrow we keep building defenses. But sleep didn't come. Mara lay in bed watching moonlight crawl across the ceiling, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. All the people who'd just bet their lives on her leadership. All the pieces that had to fall perfect for any of them to survive what was coming. Around dawn, she heard it. 3 gunshots, rapid succession, from the direction of Anderson's ranch. She was on her feet, dressed, and out the door before her mind fully processed what it meant. Rhett appeared from the barn, already mounted, leading her horse. Move, he shouted. They rode hard, arrived to find Anderson's barn on fire, flames already consuming the structure. Carl and his people were fighting it with buckets, trying to save what they could, but the fire had too much of a head start. What happened? Mara shouted over the roar. Someone threw kerosene through the window. Carl's face was black with soot. By the time we noticed, the whole thing was going up. Other ranchers arrived. Henderson's, Yates, Cole, everyone who'd made the commitment, showing up like they'd promised. They formed bucket lines, saved the house and corral, but the barn was lost. By sunrise, it was just smoking timbers and the acrid smell of destroyed feed and equipment. Carl stood staring at the ruins, and Mara saw something break in his expression. Maybe this ain't worth it. Maybe I should just… No. Rhett's voice cut sharp. That's what they want. One hit to scare everyone back into submission. It's working. Carl gestured at the destruction. That's a season's worth of feed, tools I can't replace. How am I supposed to… We rebuild. Mara heard herself say it, surprised by the steel in her voice. All of us. Together. We pool resources, raise a new barn, replace what we can. Show them this doesn't break us. Mara's right, Henderson said. They want us isolated, afraid. We do this. We prove we're neither. Barn raising, Sarah Yates added. Like the old days. Everyone contributes labor and materials. Carl looked around at the faces, saw the determination there, and something in him steadied. You'd all do that? We all signed up for this, Cole said quietly. Meant it. What followed was 3 days of the hardest work Mara had ever done. Everyone brought what they could. Lumber, nails, labor, food for the workers. They framed and raised and roofed, working from dawn past dark. Women cooked, men hammered, children ran supplies. The valley came together in a way it hadn't in years. Rhett worked like a machine, directing construction with practiced ease. Mara realized he'd done this before too, built things under pressure, united people through action. He never drew attention to himself, never claimed credit, just kept things moving. On the second day as they broke for lunch, Sheriff Palmer rode up. A heavy man with a badge that sat crooked on his vest and eyes that never quite met yours direct. Heard there was trouble out here, he said. Barn burned down, Carl replied. Arson. That's a serious accusation. Palmer dismounted slow, looked around. You got proof? Witnesses smelled kerosene. Found the bottle. Carl pointed to a charred glass container sitting on a stump. That enough? Palmer examined it without touching. Could have been an accident. Could have been anything. It was deliberate. Mara said. Part of a pattern. We've been documenting everything. Documenting. Palmer's tone suggested he found this amusing. Mrs. Calloway, I understand you're upset about your circumstances, but making wild accusations against respected businessmen. Vane did this, Carl said flatly, or had it done. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows rumors. Palmer's voice hardened. What I know is there's been a lot of agitation lately. People refusing reasonable business offers, bringing in outside troublemakers. His eyes flicked to Rhett, creating tension where there wasn't any. Tension like arson? Rhett asked quietly. Palmer bristled. I don't know you, friend, but I'd watch your mouth. I'm the law here. Could have fooled me. Rhett held his gaze. Law investigates crimes, protects citizens. What do you do besides carry Vane's water? The silence went sharp and dangerous. Palmer's hand drifted toward his gun. Several of the ranchers tensed. Mara stepped between them. Sheriff, we appreciate you coming out, she said, voice deliberately calm. We'll handle this ourselves. See that you do. Legally. Palmer mounted his horse, looked down at the gathered ranchers. Word of advice. Stop making trouble. Things have a way of working out when folks are reasonable. But stubbornness? He glanced at the burned barn. That just leads to more accidents. After he left, the mood went dark. People worked quieter, anger simmering beneath the surface. That was a mistake, Henderson said to Rhett, antagonizing the sheriff. He's not the sheriff. He's Vane's errand boy wearing a badge. Rhett hammered a nail with more force than necessary. Might as well call it what it is. Still, we need to be smart about this. Being smart is why we're raising this barn instead of hiding. Rhett looked around at everyone. They burned it to scare us. We're rebuilding to prove we don't scare. That's the message. That's what matters. By the third day, the barn stood complete. Not as big as the original, not as fancy, but solid and functional. Carl stood in the doorway, running his hand over the fresh-cut timber, and Mara saw tears in his eyes. Thank you, he said, voice rough. All of you. I won't forget this. None of us will, Mara replied. That's the point. That night, exhausted and aching, Mara sat on her porch watching stars emerge. Rhett joined her, both of them too tired to speak for a while. You know what comes next, he finally said. They escalate. They escalate. He leaned back, eyes closed. Barn was a probe, testing our response. Now they know we'll fight back, they'll come harder. So we keep preparing. We keep preparing. He opened his eyes, looked at her. But Mara, there's going to come a point where preparation isn't enough. Where we have to take the fight to them. What does that mean? Means we stop being defensive, start being offensive. He sat forward, elbows on knees. We gather evidence on Vane, real evidence. Documents, witnesses, hard proof of his operations. We make a legal case so strong it can't be ignored. And if that doesn't work? Rhett was quiet for a long time. Then we use other methods. What kind of methods? The kind I'm good at. The kind I'm not proud of. He looked at her straight. The kind that kept me awake at night for 3 years before I ended up here. Mara felt a chill despite the warm evening. I don't want to become murderers. Neither do I. But I want you to survive more than I want clean hands. He stood, stretched. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start phase 2. Which is? Finding out what Vane's really hiding. Every empire has cracks. We just need to find his. Phase 2 started with a lie. Rhett rode into town 3 days after the barn raising, dressed different than Mara had ever seen him. Clean shirt, proper hat, the kind of clothes a man wore when he wanted to blend in rather than stand out. He'd shaved too, and without the scruff he looked younger, less dangerous, almost respectable. You look like a stranger, she said as he prepared to leave. That's the idea. He checked his saddlebag one more time. I'm going to ask questions. Quietly. See who's willing to talk about Vane when they think nobody's listening. And if someone recognizes you? Nobody knows me here. That's the advantage of being a ghost for 3 years. He swung into the saddle. I'll be back by dark. If I'm not, don't come looking. That's not reassuring. Not meant to be. Meant to be smart. He looked down at her, and something in his expression softened. I've done this before, Mara. I'll be careful. She watched him ride out, dust rising behind his horse, and felt that familiar knot of worry settle in her stomach. The ranch felt emptier with him gone, even though he'd only been there a few weeks. Strange how quickly you could get used to someone's presence, how fast alone started feeling wrong again. She spent the day working, mending tack, checking cattle, the endless list of tasks that kept a ranch running. But her eyes kept drifting to the road, waiting for the silhouette of a returning rider. He came back just as the sun touched the horizon, horse-lathered and breathing hard like he'd pushed the last few miles. Mara met him at the barn. "Well?" Rhett dismounted, led the horse inside to cool down. "Vane's got problems, financial ones. Everyone's got financial problems." "Not like this." He started unsaddling, words coming quick. "I talked to a clerk at the land office. Man drinks too much, talks too much, hates his job. Vane's been leveraging properties against each other, borrowing from eastern banks using land he doesn't fully own yet. He needs your water rights specifically because without them, a chunk of his holdings become worthless. Dry land nobody wants." Mara felt something shift in her understanding. So this isn't just about expansion. It's about survival. His survival. Rhett hung the saddle, turned to face her. He's overextended. One major setback and the whole thing could collapse. That's why he's pushing so hard, so fast. He's desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. They are, but they also make mistakes. Rhett pulled a folded paper from his coat. Clerk made copies of some documents, property transfers, loan agreements. Not enough for a legal case yet, but a start. Mara unfolded the paper, saw columns of numbers and legal language she barely understood. What am I looking at? Proof he's been using intimidation to force sales below market value. See these dates? Each one corresponds to a property acquisition right after a major incident. Fire, cattle theft, water contamination. He pointed to specific entries. Patterns too consistent to be coincidence. We need more, though. More witnesses, more documents. We do. Which is why I'm going back tomorrow. And the day after that. We build this piece by piece until we have something that can't be ignored. Rhett, that's risky. You keep poking around, someone's going to notice. Let them notice. His jaw set. I'm tired of playing defense. Over the next week, Rhett made 4 more trips to town. Each time he came back with fragments, a name here, a document there, pieces of a larger picture. He talked to freight drivers who'd seen Vane's men where they shouldn't be. A former ranch hand who'd been paid to cut fences and keep quiet. A widow who'd sold for half value after her well mysteriously went dry. They started assembling it all in Mara's kitchen, papers spread across the table, creating a map of corruption that stretched back 5 years. 32 properties acquired, half of them under suspicious circumstances. Money trails that twisted through shell companies and false names. "This is enough," Mara said one night, staring at the evidence. "We take this to the territorial governor, to federal marshals. It's not enough." Rhett tapped one of the documents. "Everything here is circumstantial, suggestive but not proof. A good lawyer tears this apart in an hour. We need something definitive, something that directly ties Vane to illegal acts." "Like what?" "Like his personal records, account books, correspondence, orders to his men." Rhett leaned back, rubbed his eyes. "Stuff he keeps locked up tight. You're talking about breaking into his house. I'm talking about getting what we need by whatever means necessary." Mara stood, paced to the window. Outside, the moon was bright enough to see the cottonwood on the hill, Tom's grave beneath it. She thought about what he would say, what he would do. Tom had been a good man, an honest man. He'd believed in law and order, in doing things the right way. Tom was also dead. How would we even get in, she heard herself ask. Rhett's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed. Like he'd been waiting for her to cross this line, had been ready to cross it alone if needed. Vane hosts a poker game every other Friday, goes late, drinks heavy, house is usually empty except for a maid who sleeps on the 3rd floor. "You've been watching his place?" "I've been watching everything." He pulled out another paper, this one a rough sketch. House layout. "I talked to a woman who used to work there, got her to describe it. Safes in the study, 2nd floor. Combination lock, but old style. I can crack it." "Of course you can." Mara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What else can you do that you haven't told me?" "Lots of things. Most of them ugly." He met her eyes. This is where you decide, Mara. We do this. There's no going back. This stops being self-defense and becomes something else. What would you call it? Justice or revenge? Depends on your perspective. She thought about the burned barn, the cut fences, the threats disguised as friendly advice. Thought about Brennan's smile and Sheriff Palmer's indifference. Thought about all the people who'd lost their land because they played by rules their enemies ignored. When's the next poker game? Rhett smiled, and it was the first time she'd seen it reach his eyes. Friday, 3 days from now. They spent those days preparing. Rhett taught Mara to pick simple locks using tools he made from wire and patience, showed her how to move quietly, how to search a room efficiently, how to recognize important documents at a glance. She was clumsy at first, fingers too rough from ranch work for the delicate manipulation required. I'm terrible at this, she said after dropping the lockpick for the 10th time. You're learning. That's different. He demonstrated again, the pick sliding into the practice lock with practiced ease. This isn't about being good. It's about being good enough when it matters. And if I'm not good enough, then I do it alone and you stay here. He handed her the pick. Try again. On Thursday night, a rider came hard and fast. Daniel Henderson, face pale even in the lamplight. It's Cole, he gasped. They took him. Mara's blood went cold. What do you mean, took him? 4 men. Rode up to his place this afternoon, said Sheriff Palmer wanted to talk to him about stolen cattle. Cole went with them peacefully. Daniel's hands shook. That was 6 hours ago. He hasn't come back. Rhett was already moving, grabbing his coat, checking his gun. Where'd they take him? Don't know. Sheriff's office is empty. Nobody's seen Palmer either. Vane's Ranch. Rhett's voice went flat, cold. They've got him at Vane's Ranch. You don't know that, Mara said, but she knew it too, felt it in her gut. I know exactly that. Rhett was at the door. This is a message. They took the one who showed up last at the barn raising, the one who seemed most reluctant. They're making an example. We have to get him back. We will. Rhett turned to Daniel. Go to Anderson, Henderson, everyone. Tell them to arm up and meet at the crossroads in 1 hour. But tell them to wait for my signal. Nobody moves until I say. What are you going to do? Mara asked. Scout it out. See what we're dealing with. He grabbed her shoulders, made her look at him. Do not follow me. I need you here, organizing the others, making sure nobody does anything stupid. Rhett, trust me. He was already moving. 1 hour, crossroads, be ready for anything. He disappeared into the night, and Mara stood frozen for a moment before training kicked in. She ran to the barn, saddled her horse, rode like hell to spread the word. Within 40 minutes, 11 armed ranchers gathered at the crossroads, horses stamping, rifles ready. Where is he? Carl Anderson demanded. Scouting. He said to wait. Wait for what? While they're doing whatever to Cole? Marcus Yates' voice was tight with anger. We should ride in now, all of us. And get Cole killed, plus probably some of us. Mara kept her voice steady, even though her hands wanted to shake. Rhett knows what he's doing. Does he? Because all I know is some drifter showed up, got us all organized into a target, and now one of our own is missing. Yates looked around at the others. Maybe we backed the wrong horse. You got a better plan? Sarah Yates snapped at her husband. Because I don't see you coming up with anything besides complaints. I'm saying maybe we should... 3 gunshots echoed from the direction of Vane's property. Distant but clear. The signal. Move. Mara kicked her horse forward, and the others followed, questions forgotten in the rush of action. They found Rhett a half-mile out, horse tied to a tree, waiting in the shadows, blood on his knuckles, breathing hard. What happened? Mara demanded. Cole's in the bunkhouse. They've got him tied up, 2 guards outside, 4 more in the main house. Rhett wiped blood on his pants. I took out a perimeter guard, got close enough to see through the window. Cole's beaten but alive. Well, we're outnumbered, Henderson said. We are, but they're not expecting us. Rhett pulled out a rough map drawn in the dirt. They think we're scared, disorganized. We use that. Hit fast, extract Cole, get out before they can mount a real response. That's a prison break, someone muttered. That's a rescue, Rhett corrected. They took him illegally. We're getting him back. Anyone got a problem with that? Nobody spoke. The silence was answer enough. Good. Here's how we do it. The plan was simple, brutal, and completely insane. Half the group would create a distraction at the front, fire a few shots, make noise, draw attention. The other half would hit the bunkhouse from behind, take out the guards quietly, grab Cole, in and out in under 5 minutes. And if it goes wrong, Carl asked, then we shoot our way out and hope for the best. Rhett checked his gun. Everyone clear on their roles? Nods all around. Mara found herself in the extraction team with Rhett, Henderson, and 2 others. Her heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. They split up, moving into position. The night was dark, clouds covering the moon. Good for stealth, bad for shooting if it came to that. Mara crouched behind a water trough 20 yards from the bunkhouse, watching the 2 guards smoke and talk, completely unaware. The distraction came right on time, gunfire and shouting from the front of the main house. Both guards turned, confused, starting toward the noise. Rhett moved like a shadow, came up behind the first one, arm around his throat, dragged him down silent. Henderson took the second with a rifle butt to the head, clean, quiet, professional. They were inside the bunkhouse in seconds. Cole sat tied to a chair, face swollen, one eye completely shut. He looked up, saw them, and something like hope flickered across his face. "Took you long enough," he croaked. "Shut up and move." Rhett cut the ropes with his knife, hauled Cole to his feet. "Can you ride?" "Can I breathe?" Same answer to both, but I'll manage. They were out the back door when everything went to hell. Someone had spotted them. A shout went up, then more gunfire, this time aimed at them. Mara heard bullets snap past, felt one tug at her coat. She fired back blind, just trying to create space. "Move, move, move!" Rhett was pushing them toward the horses, returning fire with one hand, supporting Cole with the other. Henderson went down, screaming, blood spreading across his leg. Mara grabbed him, started dragging, felt her back scream in protest. More gunfire. One of Vane's men appeared from the barn, rifle raised. Rhett shot him without hesitation, the man dropping like his strings were cut. Another appeared. Another shot. Rhett was a machine, firing, reloading, firing again, creating a corridor for them to escape through. They reached the horses. Got Cole mounted, got Henderson up behind his son. Bullets kicked up dirt all around them. Somewhere in the chaos, Mara heard Brennan's voice shouting orders, heard more men coming. "Ride!" Rhett fired 3 more shots, dropped into his saddle, and they were moving. Horses stretched out full, thunder of hooves drowning out the continued gunfire behind them. They didn't stop until they were 2 miles away, hidden in a grove of trees, everyone gasping, checking for injuries. Henderson's leg was bad but not fatal. Cole looked like hell but was conscious and coherent. Everyone else had scratches, bruises, a few bullet grazes that could have been worse. "That was the stupidest thing I've ever done," Sarah Yates said, and then started laughing. Hysteria probably, but it spread. Within moments, they were all laughing, the release of tension and fear and adrenaline pouring out in waves. "We actually did it," Daniel Henderson said, wonder in his voice. "We actually got him back." "We declared war," Carl said, quieter. "That's what we did." He was right. This wasn't sabotage anymore, wasn't pressure or intimidation. They just raided Vane's property, shot his men, stolen back someone he'd taken. There was no pretending now, no gray area. The line was drawn in blood. Rhett was the only one not celebrating. He sat on his horse, reloading his gun with mechanical precision, face expressionless. Mara rode up beside him. "You okay?" "I killed 2 men tonight, maybe 3. He didn't look at her. "That's not okay." "They would have killed us." "I know. Doesn't change what I did." He finished reloading, holstered the weapon. "Doesn't change what comes next either." "What comes next?" Vane retaliates. Hard. Fast. Everything we've done just got escalated. He finally met her eyes. "This is the point where people die, Mara. Maybe us, maybe them. But blood's in the water now." The group rode back together, dropping people at their respective ranches, everyone armed and alert. By the time Mara and Rhett reached her place, dawn was threatening the horizon. They sat their horses for a moment, too exhausted to dismount. "Friday," Rhett said. "The poker game. We still do it?" "Now more than ever." Mara's voice was rough from smoke and shouting. We need that evidence. Need to end this before more people die. You understand what you're saying? We break into his house tomorrow night. We're not coming back as the same people. I haven't been the same person since Tom died. Since you showed up. Since any of this started. She looked at him. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of waiting for the next attack. We finish this. Rhett nodded slowly. Then we finish this. Friday came too fast and too slow. Every hour dragged like pulling wire through mud, but suddenly it was dark, and they were riding toward town, dressed in black, tools hidden in saddlebags. The other ranchers knew something was happening, but not what. Plausible deniability, Rhett called it. If this went wrong, they couldn't be implicated. They left the horses a quarter-mile out, approached Vane's house on foot. It was a massive thing, 3 stories of wealth built on other people's suffering. Lights blazed in the ground floor parlor where the poker game was happening. Male laughter drifted through windows, the sound of men secure in their power. Back entrance, Rhett whispered. Servant's door, should be unlocked. It was. They slipped inside, found themselves in a dark kitchen, the smell of earlier dinner still lingering. Somewhere above, floorboards creaked. The maid, probably. They froze, waited. The sound didn't repeat. The house was laid out like Rhett's sketch. They moved through hallways lined with expensive paintings, past rooms full of furniture that cost more than Mara's entire ranch. The casual display of wealth made her angry in a way she hadn't expected. Second floor. Study door locked. Rhett had it open in 30 seconds, his picks working with the kind of ease that came from practice Mara didn't want to think about. Inside, the study was all dark wood and leather, shelves of books that probably never got read. And in the corner, a safe built into the wall. Rhett knelt in front of it, ear pressed to the metal, fingers working the dial. Mara stood guard at the door, heart pounding so loud she was sure someone would hear. Below, the poker game continued, a burst of laughter, the clink of glasses. Come on, Rhett muttered. The dial clicked, turned, clicked again. Then voices in the hallway, coming closer. Someone's coming, Mara hissed. Almost got it. Rhett, got it. The safe door swung open. Rhett started grabbing papers, stuffing them into his coat. Ledgers, correspondence, loose documents. No time to sort. Just take everything. The voices were right outside the door now. Rhett closed the safe, locked it, turned just as the door handle started moving. Mara grabbed his arm, pulled him toward the window. He understood instantly, had it open in seconds. They were climbing through as the door opened behind them. Swear, I heard something in here. They dropped to the roof of the first floor extension, scrambled across tiles, dropped again to the ground. Mara's ankle screamed when she landed wrong, but she kept moving, limping after Rhett toward the trees. Behind them, shouts erupted. Someone had seen them, or figured it out, or both. They ran. Behind them, the house exploded with activity, doors slamming, men shouting, horses being saddled. But Mara and Rhett had a head start in motivation. They reached their horses, mounted, rode hard into the darkness. Pursuit came fast. Mara heard hoofbeats behind them, someone shouting to cut them off at the creek. Rhett veered left, taking them through rougher terrain where local knowledge mattered more than speed. He'd scouted this, she realized, had planned escape routes. They lost their pursuers in a maze of coulees and washouts, finally emerging onto the main road 3 miles from Mara's ranch. They rode the rest of the way at a steady pace, trying to look normal despite being covered in dirt and breathing like they'd run from hell. Back at the ranch, they locked the doors, drew the curtains, spread the stolen documents across the kitchen table. Ledgers showing payments to Sheriff Palmer. Correspondence ordering intimidation of specific ranchers. A letter from an Eastern bank threatening foreclosure if certain water rights weren't acquired by month's end. Bills of sale for properties acquired at fractions of their value. Notes in Vane's own handwriting detailing the burning of Anderson's barn, the contamination of a well, orders to handle uncooperative landowners. It was all there. Everything they needed, proof of corruption, fraud, extortion, arson, conspiracy. More than enough for federal charges. We did it, Mara breathed. We actually did it. Rhett was reading one of the letters, his expression growing darker. Mara, look at this. She took the paper. It was dated 3 days ago, addressed to Brennan. The language was cold, clinical. If the ranchers couldn't be intimidated into selling, more permanent solutions were authorized. Specific names followed: Carl Anderson, James Cole, Robert Henderson. And at the top of the list, Mara Calloway. "They're planning to kill us," she said, voice hollow. "Not just pressure, actually kill us." By the end of the month, Rhett's jaw clenched. "We don't have time to go through official channels. We take this to the territorial capital, file formal charges. That's weeks of processing. They'll move before then." "So what do we do?" Before Rhett could answer, gunfire erupted from outside. Windows shattered. Bullets tore through walls. Mara hit the floor, heard Rhett cursing, scrambling for his rifle. "They followed us," he shouted. More gunfire. The front door splintered. Mara crawled to where she'd left her rifle, grabbed it, took position by the window. Outside, she counted at least 8 riders, maybe more. They'd surrounded the house, were laying down suppressive fire to keep them pinned. "We can't stay here." Mara fired twice, saw one rider duck. "They'll burn us out." "Back door." Rhett was already moving, grabbing the documents, shoving them back in his coat. "We make for the barn, get the horses." An explosion shook the house. Mara smelled smoke immediately. They'd thrown something through the back window, maybe kerosene and fire. Flames spread fast across the kitchen floor. "Go! Go!" Rhett pushed her toward the front door. They burst through into open ground, firing as they ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. Someone screamed. One of Vane's men hit. Rhett dropped another one, his shooting eerily calm despite the chaos. They made it to the barn, but horses were already spooked by the gunfire and flames. Mara's mare reared, nearly trampled her. Rhett caught the reins, got control, was lifting Mara into the saddle when Brennan appeared in the barn doorway. "End of the line," he said, raising his rifle. Rhett was faster. Shot him, center mass. Brennan went down hard, rifle clattering away. But more men were coming. Too many. No way out except through them. Then signal shots rang out from the direction of Anderson's ranch. 3 quick bursts, then again from Henderson's place. The watch system activated. Help was coming. "Hold them," Rhett shouted, taking position behind a water trough. "Just hold them 2 more minutes." Mara fired until her rifle was empty, reloaded, fired again. The world narrowed to muzzle flash and thunder, smoke and cordite. She stopped thinking, just reacted. Shoot, reload, shoot. Beside her, Rhett moved like he'd done this 1,000 times. Maybe he had. Then friendly fire came from the north. Carl Anderson and his sons, riding hard, rifles blazing. Then from the east, the Hendersons. The Yates from the south. Vane's men found themselves caught between 2 forces, their advantage evaporating. It didn't last long after that. Vane's men broke, scattered, rode off into the darkness, leaving their dead and wounded. Mara lowered her rifle, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Her house was burning. The barn was shot full of holes. 3 men lay dead in her yard, and she was still alive. "Everybody okay?" Carl shouted. "We're okay," Mara shouted back, though she wasn't sure it was true. Rhett was checking Brennan, found a pulse, weak but present. "He's alive." "Barely." "Good," Carl said coldly. "He can testify." They spent the next hour securing the property, tending wounds, accounting for who'd been hit. 2 of Henderson's people had grazes. One of Anderson's sons had a bullet through his shoulder, painful, but not fatal. On Vane's side, 3 dead, 2 wounded, including Brennan. And Mara's house, her home for 6 years, burned to the ground. She stood watching it collapse, flames consuming everything Tom had built, everything they'd shared. The bed where he'd died, the table where they'd eaten, the porch where she'd said goodbye every morning. All of it, gone. Rhett appeared beside her, face black with soot. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was just wood." She wiped her eyes. "The land's still here. That's what matters." "We've got the evidence," he said quietly. "Everything we need to destroy Vane. But we've got to move fast. Get it to federal marshals before he can cover his tracks." "How long?" "I can ride to the territorial capital, file formal charges with copies of everything. Be there in 2 days if I push hard." He looked at her. "But I won't leave you here undefended." "You have to. This is our shot." Mara turned to face him. "I'll be fine. Everyone's here. We're organized. You go. End this." He studied her face, looking for doubt maybe, or fear. She showed him neither. All right. He touched her shoulder briefly. Hold the line till I get back. Go. He left before dawn, saddlebags loaded with evidence, riding the fastest horse they had. Mara watched him disappear into the gray morning light, felt the weight of his absence immediately. The next 2 days were the longest of her life. They fortified what was left. The ranchers worked through the night, turning Mara's property into something between a camp and a fortress. Wagons circled near the barn, rifles positioned at strategic points, watch rotations doubled. Nobody slept much. The bodies of Vane's men had been loaded onto a wagon and taken to town. Let the sheriff explain that. Brennan they kept, tied, and guarded, his shoulder bandaged but his mouth still running when he was conscious. You're all dead, he muttered through broken teeth. Vane's got connections. Territorial judge, land commissioners, people you can't touch. You think some stolen papers change that? Shut up, Carl told him, not unkindly. Save it for the marshals. Mara spent those hours moving between watch posts, checking on people, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Her house was a smoking ruin. Everything she owned that mattered was either ash or standing in this yard holding weapons. The weight of it pressed down like winter snow. Sarah Yates found her around midnight, sitting on what used to be her front porch steps, staring at nothing. You should rest, Sarah said. Can't. Too much to do. There's always too much to do. That's ranching. Sarah sat beside her, groaning as her knees protested. But if you don't rest, you'll be useless when it matters. When does it stop mattering? Mara's voice came out harder than intended. Every second feels like the one where everything falls apart. I know, been there. Sarah pulled out a flask, took a drink, offered it to Mara. Lost my first husband to a property dispute in Texas. Different circumstances, same kind of men. Powerful folks who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Mara accepted the flask, drank. Whiskey burned going down. What happened? They took everything, house, land, livestock, left me with nothing but debt and a baby. Sarah took the flask back. I ran. Came here, started over with Marcus. Swore I'd never let anyone push me around again. But you stayed quiet when Vane started his games. I did, because I was scared, because I remembered what it cost last time to fight back. Sarah looked at the ruins of the house. But watching you stand up, watching what you and Rhett built here, it reminded me that running just means you die slower. At least fighting gives you a chance. Some chance. My house is gone. People are dead, and we're betting everything on documents that might not even matter. They'll matter. Sarah's voice held certainty. You saw what was in there. That's not just evidence. That's a pattern. Federal marshals don't ignore patterns like that. And if they do? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then we were right to fight anyway, because living under Vane's thumb would have been worse than anything that happens here. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they just made Mara more aware of how fragile everything was, how easily this could all collapse into more death and fire. Dawn came gray and cold. No word from Rhett. Mara told herself that was normal. The territorial capital was 2 days hard riding. He wouldn't have even arrived yet, but the silence felt ominous anyway. Around noon, a rider approached under a white flag. One of Vane's men, young, nervous, hands visibly empty. I got a message, he called from a safe distance. Mister, Vane wants to talk. Peaceful-like, just him and Mrs. Calloway. Tell Vane he can talk to federal marshals, Carl shouted back. He says he's got a better offer, says things don't have to end in more blood. The kid's voice shook. He just wants to talk. 1 hour, neutral ground. The old Henderson property, it's empty. Nobody's got claim to it. Mara walked forward before anyone could stop her. Why should I believe anything Vane says? Because he's offering you a way out. All of you. The kid gestured at the gathered ranchers. No more fighting, no more dying, just talk. It's a trap, Daniel Henderson said quietly. Probably. Mara studied the messenger. Tell Vane I'll meet him. Noon tomorrow. Henderson property. But I'm bringing people, and they'll be armed. He said you could bring whoever you want, long as they stay outside. Just you and him in the house. Done. Now get off my land before someone shoots you for the company you keep. The kid rode off fast, nearly falling out of his saddle in his hurry. The moment he was gone, the ranchers erupted. You can't seriously be considering this, Marcus Yates said. I'm not considering, I'm going. Mara held up a hand against the protests. He wants to talk, let him talk. Maybe he's looking for a way out that doesn't end with him in prison. Or maybe he wants you in one place so he can finish what Brennan started, Carl said. Mara, this is foolish. Oh, foolish would be refusing to hear what he has to say when we're sitting on burned ground with 3 dead men in our tally. She looked around at them. I'm not surrendering, I'm not folding, but I'm also not so proud I won't listen to terms. What terms could he possibly offer that we'd accept? Sarah asked. I don't know. That's why I'm going to find out. They argued for another hour, but Mara was immovable. Finally, reluctantly, they agreed to the meet, with conditions. Armed escorts would surround the property. At the first sign of trouble, they'd come in shooting, and Mara would wear Tom's old coat, the thick one that might stop a bullet if she was lucky. That night, Mara cleaned her rifle for the 3rd time, hands moving automatically while her mind raced. Part of her knew this was stupid, walking into what could easily be an ambush. But another part, the part that was tired of reacting, tired of being hunted, wanted to look Silas Vane in the eye and see what kind of man hid behind all that power and money. She must have dozed off because she jerked awake to someone shaking her shoulder. Daniel Henderson, his face pale in the lamplight. Rider coming, fast, alone. Mara grabbed her rifle, was outside in seconds. The rider resolved into a familiar silhouette. Rhett, pushing his horse harder than he should, the animal lathered and stumbling. He practically fell out of the saddle, caught himself against the fence. You're back early, Mara said, relief flooding through her. It's done. Rhett's voice was ragged with exhaustion. Filed formal charges. Federal marshals are coming. 3 of them, due here in 4 days. 4 days? Best they could do. They're coming from Fort Benton, had to arrange transport and jurisdiction clearances. He accepted water from someone, drank deep. But they're coming, and when they arrive, Vane's finished. 4 days might as well be 4 years. Mara told him about the meeting, about Vane's offer to talk. Rhett's expression went dark. Absolutely not. It's already arranged? Then unarrange it. Range. Mara, this is exactly how powerful men work. They stall, they negotiate, they make promises while their lawyers and guns get into position. 4 days is nothing if he can eliminate witnesses before the marshals arrive. Or 4 days is enough time for him to realize he's lost and start looking for an exit that doesn't end with him in chains. Mara met his eyes. I'm going. You can come with me or not, but I'm going. Then I'm coming. Rhett's jaw set. But if this goes wrong, when has anything gone right since you showed up? Mara tried to smile, failed. We'll handle it like we've handled everything else. Badly, but together. The next morning arrived too fast. Mara dressed in Tom's coat, heavy and smelling faintly of him still. It hurt to wear it, but the weight was oddly comforting, like he was there with her, backing her up one more time. The old Henderson property sat in a valley between 3 ranches, the house abandoned for 2 years since the family moved east. Perfect neutral ground, visible from multiple angles, hard to approach without being seen. Mara and Rhett rode in with Carl, the Hendersons, and a dozen others spreading out in a loose perimeter. Vane was already there. He stood on the porch of the empty house, a tall man in his 50s with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of face that probably smiled easy when things went his way. 3 men flanked him, bodyguards, armed but not openly threatening. Yet. Mrs. Calloway, Vane called as they approached. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. Mara dismounted but stayed back, Rhett at her shoulder. You wanted to talk, so talk. Vane's smile thinned. Direct. I appreciate that. Saves time. He gestured to the house. Shall we discuss this inside? More comfortable than shouting across a yard. I'm comfortable right here. Very well. Vane descended the steps, his men following. Mara heard rifles cock behind her, her people, ready. Vane's bodyguards tensed. For a moment the air felt electric with violence waiting to happen. Easy, Vane said to his men, then to Mara. I'm here to make you an offer, a genuine one. I'll pay fair market value for your water rights. You keep the land, the house. He paused, correcting himself. You rebuild the house. I'll even contribute to construction costs. All I want is access to the water. And if I refuse? Then we continue this unpleasantness until someone wins. Could be you, could be me. Either way, more people die. Vane's expression stayed pleasant, but his eyes were cold. I'm a businessman, Mrs. Calloway. I don't enjoy violence, but I'm also practical. I need those water rights, and I'm willing to pay for them properly this time. This time. Meaning you admit the previous attempts weren't proper. I admit that my associates may have been overzealous in their methods. Vane glanced at Rhett, just as yours may have been overzealous breaking into my home and stealing private documents. Documents that prove fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder, Rhett said quietly. Federal marshals are very interested in those documents. Something flickered across Vane's face. Surprise, maybe? Or calculation? So I've heard. Unfortunately for you, federal marshals are also very interested in violent insurrectionists who kill lawful deputies and raid private property. He pulled a paper from his coat. I have statements from witnesses placing you at multiple crime scenes. Sheriff Palmer has formally requested federal assistance in apprehending a dangerous criminal element operating in this valley. Oh, Palmer's on your payroll, Mara said. Palmer is a duly elected law enforcement officer. His word carries weight. Vane tucked the paper away. So here's the situation. You have evidence against me. I have evidence against you. We both have federal authorities coming to sort this out. The question is, do we want them arriving to find a resolution or a war zone? Mara felt the logic of it, the trap closing. If they kept fighting and people kept dying, the marshals might decide both sides were guilty, might arrest everyone and let judges sort it out. And judges, Vane probably had several in his pocket. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. A settlement. You sell me water access at fair rates. I drop all criminal charges. We tell the marshals this was a business dispute that got out of hand, now resolved peacefully. Vane spread his hands. Everyone walks away. You get money to rebuild. I get what I need. Nobody goes to prison. Except you still win, Rhett said. You get the water rights, which was the goal all along. I get access, not ownership. Mrs. Calloway retains her property. That's not winning. That's compromise. Vane looked at Mara. You're a smart woman. You know how these situations end when they go to court. Years of legal battles. Thousands in lawyer fees. And at the end, maybe you win, maybe you don't. But either way, you're broke and exhausted. This way, you get paid and move on. This way, you escape justice for the people you've hurt, the families you've destroyed. Mara's voice shook with anger. The man you had beaten and kidnapped, the barn you burned, the lives you've ruined. I did none of those things. Vane's tone stayed reasonable. Perhaps people acting in my interest did without my knowledge or consent. That's unfortunate. But punishing me for their overreach serves no one. You lying son of a... Rhett started forward, but Mara caught his arm. Let me think. She turned away, walked a few paces. Behind her, she felt everyone waiting, her people ready to fight, Vane's people ready to shoot, the whole situation balanced on the edge of explosion. The logical play was to take the deal, get money, rebuild, live to fight another day. But logic hadn't kept her going these past weeks. Stubbornness had. Anger had. The memory of Tom's grave on the hill and every small rancher who'd been pushed out before her had. If she took this deal, Vane won. Not completely, but enough. He'd learned that pressure and violence worked, that you could buy your way out of consequences if you were rich enough. And the next person who stood up to him would face the same tactics, only worse because he'd know they eventually folded. She turned back. No deal? Vane's pleasant mask slipped. Excuse me? I said no. We're not settling. We're not compromising. The marshals can see all the evidence and make their own judgment. Mara walked closer, close enough to see the rage building behind his eyes. You want these water rights? You'll have to kill me for them. And good luck doing that with federal witnesses watching. You're making a serious mistake. I've made plenty of those. This isn't one of them. She turned to leave, felt Rhett moving with her. Mrs. Calloway. Vane's voice went hard. You should know, the marshals aren't the only federal presence interested in this situation. I have friends in the territorial government. Friends who can make your life very difficult, regardless of what evidence you present. Then I guess we'll see who has better friends. Mara kept walking. They were 10 feet from their horses when Vane spoke again, all pretense of civility gone. You could have walked away rich. Now you'll be lucky to walk away alive. Mara stopped, looked back. That a threat? That's a promise. Vane smiled, and it was the coldest thing Mara had ever seen. 4 days until the marshals arrive. Lot can happen in 4 days. Then we better be ready for it. Mara mounted her horse, and the other ranchers closed ranks around her. They rode out together, backs exposed, waiting for gunfire that didn't come. They made it a quarter mile before Carl spoke. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Probably both, Mara said. But I meant what I said. We don't negotiate with people like him. Even if it costs us everything? Everything's already gone. My house, my husband, my peace. It's all burned or buried. All I got left is the land and my spine. Damned if I'm trading either. They returned to find the camp on high alert. Word had spread about the meeting, about Vane's threats. The mood was grim but determined. These were people who'd committed, who'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross. Retreat wasn't an option anymore. Rhett pulled Mara aside once they'd dismounted. 4 days. We need to survive 4 days. We've survived this long. Barely. And Vane knows the timeline now. He knows he's got a window to act before federal authority shows up. Rhett looked toward the road, calculating. He's going to hit us. All of us. Coordinated attack to eliminate witnesses and evidence before the marshals arrive. So we make it impossible for him to do that. Mara's mind was already moving. We consolidate. Everyone who's with us moves here, brings their families, their important possessions. We turn this place into a fortress and dare him to try. That's a lot of people in one place. Easy target. Also a lot of guns, a lot of witnesses. She met his eyes. He wants to make us disappear quietly. We make ourselves loud and visible. Send riders to neighboring valleys. Spread word about what's happening. Write letters to newspapers. Make this so public that violence becomes impossible without consequences. Rhett considered, then nodded slowly. It could work. Might work. Better than waiting scattered and isolated. They put the plan in motion immediately. Riders went out with messages. By nightfall, wagons were arriving, whole families, livestock, possessions loaded haphazard but moving. The Hendersons came with 3 wagons and 24 cattle. The Yates brought their household and hired hands. Cole arrived with his family, still beaten but stubborn. Even families from outside their immediate alliance showed up, people who'd been watching and waiting to see which way the wind blew. By dawn the next day, Mara's property looked like a small town. 43 people, counting children. Livestock corralled and guarded. Wagons circled in defensive positions. Armed watches at every approach. It wasn't pretty, and the logistics were a nightmare. Feeding everyone, sanitation, space. But it was visible. Undeniable. And 3 days from federal rescue. Vane's response came that afternoon. Not violence, something worse. A writer delivered a court order. Judge Morrison, territorial appointee, had issued an injunction against armed insurrection and unlawful assembly. Everyone was ordered to disperse immediately or face arrest for conspiracy and sedition. Sheriff Palmer would enforce the order with deputies and, if necessary, territorial militia. This is insane, Sarah said, reading the document. We're not insurrecting. We're protecting our property. Doesn't matter what we call it. Judge gave him legal cover. Carl crumpled the paper. Palmer shows up with militia, claims we're in rebellion, federal marshals might side with them instead of us. The marshals have our evidence, Mara argued. They know what Vane's done. They also know what we've done. Broken into private property, killed deputies, defied legal orders. Rhett's voice was grim. Vane's building a narrative where he's the victim of violent criminals. If we're not careful, the marshals arrive and arrest us instead of him. So what do we do? Daniel Henderson asked. Disperse? Go back to our ranches and hope Palmer doesn't round us up individually? We stay, Mara said, and we document everything, every threat, every illegal order, every piece of corruption. We build such a clear record that no marshal, no judge, no politician can ignore it. They worked through the night, writing statements, gathering affidavits, organizing the evidence from Vane's safe into a coherent case. People who'd been threatened came forward with specifics. The former ranch hand who'd been paid to sabotage finally gave a full confession. Even Brennan, facing a noose for murder, started talking about orders he'd received directly from Vane. By morning, they had something that looked less like vigilante justice and more like a legal prosecution. Mara sealed everything in waterproof containers, Made 3 copies, gave one to Carl, one to Sarah, one to Rhett. If something happens to me, she told them, make sure the marshals get this. Nothing's happening to you, Rhett said. I won't let it. You can't promise that. Watch me. He checked his guns, the gesture automatic now. 2 more days. We just need 2 more days. They didn't get 2 days. Palmer arrived at noon the next day with 30 men. Not just deputies, hired guns, militia, men with more weapons than scruples. They positioned themselves on the ridge overlooking Mara's property, a show of force designed to intimidate. Palmer rode forward under a white flag, stopped at shouting distance. This is your final warning, he called. Disperse immediately, or you will be arrested for armed insurrection against territorial authority. We're on private property, Mara shouted back. We have the right to defend ourselves. You have the right to surrender peacefully. You got 1 hour to clear out. After that, we're coming in. On what authority? Palmer held up a paper. Warrant signed by Judge Morrison. Conspiracy, sedition, murder. Applies to Mara Calloway, Rhett Dalton, Carl Anderson. He listed 15 names, basically everyone who'd been involved in the raid on Vane's property. Those charges are fabricated, Carl yelled. Tell it to the judge. 1 hour. Palmer wheeled his horse around, rode back to his line. Silence fell over the camp. People looked at each other, fear and anger mixing. Some of the families who'd come late started packing, ready to leave before violence erupted. Let them go, Mara said quietly to Rhett. Anyone who wants out, let them out. About a dozen people left, families with young children mostly, people who'd been on the fence anyway. Mara didn't blame them. But she didn't join them either. 31 remained. 31 people willing to stand against overwhelming force for 1 more day. 1 more day until the marshals arrived. The hour passed in tense silence. Palmer's deadline came and went. The sun moved across the sky. And nothing happened. Why aren't they moving? Daniel whispered. Because they're waiting for something, Rhett said. Orders, maybe. Or darkness. Darkness came. Still, Palmer's men held position. Not attacking, but not leaving either. A siege. They were going to starve them out or wait for mistakes. Around midnight, Mara was doing rounds when she heard horses approaching from the south, the one direction Palmer's men hadn't covered. She raised her rifle, then lowered it as 3 riders came into the firelight. Federal marshals. A day early. They wore the distinctive badges, carried official paperwork, looked tired and irritated in equal measure. The lead marshal, a scarred man in his 50s named Hewitt, dismounted stiffly. Someone want to explain why I've got Sheriff Palmer telling me about armed insurrection and Silas Vane filing emergency injunctions? He looked around at the armed camp. Because from where I'm standing, this looks pretty insurrection-y. Then you're standing in the wrong place, Mara said. Come inside. We'll show you what it really looks like. They spent 3 hours in the barn showing Marshal Hewitt everything. The ledgers from Vane's safe, correspondence ordering violence, payment records to Sheriff Palmer, documented incidents with dates and witnesses. Brennan's confession, recorded and signed. Affidavits from families who'd been forced out. The pattern stretched back years, methodical and damning. Hewitt read it all in silence, his 2 deputies taking notes, occasionally asking questions. The marshal's face gave nothing away. No shock, no anger, just the flat professional attention of someone who'd seen corruption before and knew how deep it could run. This is substantial, he finally said, setting down the last document. If even half of this holds up under scrutiny, Vane's looking at federal charges, Palmer too. It'll hold up, Rhett said. We've got witnesses willing to testify, physical evidence, paper trails. And you've also got dead bodies, property destruction, and an armed camp that looks an awful lot like preparation for war. Hewitt fixed Mara with a hard stare. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying this is messy, and messy cases don't always shake out the way they should. So what happens now? Carl asked. Now I go talk to Sheriff Palmer and Silas Vane, hear their side. Then I make arrests based on the totality of evidence. Hewitt stood, gathered the documents. In the meantime, you people stay put. No more raids, no more violence. You've made your case. Let the law handle it from here. The law hasn't been handling it, Mara said. That's why we're in this situation. I understand that, but I'm federal authority, not some bought and paid for local judge. You've got my attention now. Trust me to do my job. Hewitt's tone softened slightly. I know it's hard after everything you've been through. But vigilante justice, even righteous vigilante justice, has a way of becoming the very thing it's fighting against. After the marshals left, the camp fell into uneasy waiting. Nobody quite believed it was over, but nobody knew what else to do except prepare for the next crisis that might or might not come. Mara found Rhett standing watch near the burned remains of her house, staring at nothing. "You think Hewitt will actually arrest them?" she asked. "I think he'll try. Whether he succeeds depends on how deep Vane's connections go." Rhett didn't look at her. "Men like Vane don't fall easy. They've got lawyers, political favors, escape routes we can't see. So we did all this for nothing. No, we did it because it needed doing, because standing up matters even when you lose." He finally turned to face her. "That's the thing about fighting corrupt power. You don't always win, but every time someone stands up, it gets a little easier for the next person. The cracks get a little wider." "That's a bleak way to look at it." "It's an honest way." He managed a tired smile. "But I've been wrong before. Maybe this time we actually win." Morning brought news. A rider from town, not one of Vane's people, just a merchant who'd witnessed what happened, came at dawn with information. Marshal Hewitt had arrested Sheriff Palmer at midnight. Palmer had resisted, reached for his gun. One of the deputy marshals shot him. Palmer was dead. The camp erupted in chaos, some celebrating, others horrified that it had ended in more violence. Mara felt numb. Palmer had been corrupt, complicit in everything Vane did. But he was also a man with a family, with a life that had ended in a dusty office over corruption he probably thought was normal. "What about Vane?" Rhett asked the messenger. "That's the thing. Marshals went to arrest him this morning. He was gone. House empty, personal items cleared out. They're saying he ran during the night, soon as he heard about Palmer." "How far could he get?" Carl demanded. "He's got money, connections, probably fake identities already prepared." Rhett's voice was grim. "Man like that, he could disappear into Denver or San Francisco, start over somewhere nobody knows his face." "So he wins anyway," Mara said bitterly. "All of this. And he just rides away. The marshals are looking. They've sent telegrams to other jurisdictions." The messenger shifted uncomfortably. "But yeah, he might get away." After the messenger left, Mara walked to the hill where Tom was buried. She sat beneath the cottonwood, back against the trunk, staring out at the valley. The ranch looked different from up here, smaller, more fragile. All the land Tom had worked for, that she'd nearly died defending, just a patch of dirt in a world that kept moving regardless of who held the deed. "I don't know if we won," she said to the grave. "I don't even know what winning looks like anymore." The wind moved through the grass, carrying no answers. Rhett found her an hour later, settled beside her without speaking. They sat in silence, watching clouds move across the sky. "I'm leaving," he said finally. Mara's chest tightened. "When?" "Few days. Once things settle." He picked up a stick, started that familiar carving motion. "You don't need me anymore. Got your alliance, got federal attention. The other ranchers will help rebuild. You'll be fine." "And you?" "I'll keep moving. That's what I do." But his hands on the wood were tense, the carving jerky instead of smooth. "What if I asked you to stay?" Rhett stopped carving. "Why would you do that?" "Because you're good at this. The ranch work, the organizing, the—" She struggled for words. "Because I'm tired of being alone. Because somewhere in all this mess, you became someone I trust. Someone I—" She stopped, not quite ready to finish that sentence. "Someone you what?" "Someone I'd miss." Rhett was quiet for a long time. "I'm not good at staying, Mara. Every place I've stopped, I've ended up leaving wreckage behind. It's safer if I keep moving." "Safer for who?" "For people around me." He set down the carving, and she saw it was the bird again. Wings spread, almost complete. "I told you what I was, what I did. That doesn't just disappear because I want it to." "No, but it doesn't have to define you either." Mara reached over, took the carving from his hands. It was beautiful, delicate, the kind of thing that required patience and care. "This is who you are too. The man who fixes things instead of breaking them, who stays and fights when running would be easier." "I've done plenty of breaking." "So have I. So has everyone down there." She gestured toward the camp. "We're all broken people trying to build something better. That's what this whole thing was about, refusing to let powerful men break us completely. Rhett looked at her, something vulnerable in his expression. What are you asking, Mara? I'm asking if you want to help me rebuild. Not just the house. Everything. Make this place into something that matters. She held his gaze. I'm asking if you want to stop running long enough to see what happens when you stand still. And if I bring trouble with me? If my past catches up? Then we'll handle it. Same as we handled Vane. Same as we handled everything else. Together. Rhett searched her face, looking for doubt maybe, or false hope. She showed him neither, just steady certainty and the kind of tired honesty that came from surviving hell and deciding to keep living anyway. I'm not an easy man to be around, he said quietly. I'm not an easy woman. We'll figure it out. He smiled then, genuine and surprised, like he'd forgotten how. All right, I'll stay. Yeah? Yeah. He took the carving back, examined it. For however long it takes to finish rebuilding. We'll see what happens after that. It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was a start. 3 days later, word came that Silas Vane had been captured trying to board a train in Cheyenne. Federal marshals arrested him based on the evidence Rhett had filed and the additional testimony they'd gathered. The list of charges took 5 minutes to read. Fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, corruption of public officials, land theft. His trial would happen in federal court, immune to the local connections he'd relied on for years. The Valley celebrated quietly, wary of counting victories before they were certain. But slowly, life started returning to something like normal. Families who'd fled began coming back. The territorial governor appointed a new sheriff, an outsider with no ties to local power structures. Investigations opened into Judge Morrison and other officials who'd enabled Vane's operations. Mara's property became the center of reconstruction. They started with the barn, practical first, always practical, then moved to building a new house. Not exactly where the old one stood, but close enough. This one was bigger, sturdier, designed by committee with input from everyone who'd stood with her. Rhett worked like a man possessed, leading the construction with the same focused intensity he'd brought to everything else. Mara watched him frame walls and set posts, saw the way people naturally followed his direction, and realized he'd been a leader long before he became a drifter. Martial work had taught him to organize and strategize. The years running had just hidden those skills under layers of self-imposed isolation. You're good at this, she told him one evening as they surveyed the day's progress. Building? Leading. People listen to you. People listen to you. I just know how to turn listening into action. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Besides, this is temporary. Once the house is done, you'll find another reason to stay. Mara smiled. Face it, Rhett. You're terrible at leaving. He tried to look annoyed but couldn't quite manage it. Maybe. The house took 6 weeks to complete. It rose from ash and determination, every board a small victory over the forces that had tried to break them. The day they finished the roof, the whole valley showed up. Not just the allied ranchers, but families from 3 counties over who'd heard the story and wanted to be part of something that felt like hope. They held a barn dance that night, the first celebration anyone could remember in years. Fiddles and guitars appeared from nowhere. Someone brought a barrel of whiskey that tasted like kerosene, but nobody complained. Children ran wild between wagons, chasing each other in the future with equal enthusiasm. Mara stood on her new porch, watching it all, feeling the weight of what they'd built together. Not just buildings, but community. Not just survival, but defiance against the idea that might made right. You did good, Carl Anderson said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of whiskey. We did good. All of us. Mara accepted the cup. None of this works if everyone doesn't stand together. That's the truth. Carl clinked his cup against hers. Tom would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. We stood up to a monster and won. Barely won. A lot of people paid for this victory. They did. But they paid fighting for something that mattered. That counts. Carl took a drink. You planning to stay? Work the ranch? Planning to try? Don't know what else I'd do. You could do a lot of things. You proved that. Organize, lead, fight when necessary. Carl looked at her seriously. Territory needs people like you. People who won't fold when power comes knocking. I'm just a rancher. You're a lot more than that now, whether you meant to be or not. He nodded toward where Rhett was showing some kids a card trick. And him? He's staying? Says he is. You believe him? Mara watched Rhett laugh at something one of the children said, saw the way tension had gradually left his shoulders over the past weeks, how he'd started sleeping without the nightmares that used to wake him at 3 a.m. I'm starting to. Good. You two are good together, different kinds of broken that somehow fit. Carl finished his whiskey. Now come on. Sarah says if you don't dance at least once at your own party, she's going to drag you out there herself. The party lasted until dawn, people sleeping where they dropped, too exhausted and happy to care about propriety. Mara found herself dancing 3 times, once with Carl, once with Daniel Henderson, once with Rhett, who moved stiff and awkward like he'd forgotten how or never learned properly. I'm terrible at this, he muttered after stepping on her foot for the 3rd time. You're terrible at a lot of things. I'm keeping you anyway. Mara leaned her head against his chest, felt his heart beating steady. Thank you. For staying, for fighting, for all of it. You don't have to thank me. I know, but I am anyway. They swayed more than danced, neither of them graceful, both of them scarred and stubborn and still standing. Around them, the valley celebrated a victory that had cost too much and meant everything. Tomorrow would bring new problems. It always did. Drought or disease or taxes or 100 other threats that came with working land that didn't care about your effort. But tonight, they'd won, and that had to be enough. Vane's trial happened 3 months later. Mara and Rhett rode to the territorial capital to testify, along with a dozen other witnesses. The proceedings took 2 weeks, the evidence so overwhelming that Vane's expensive lawyers could barely mount a defense. He was convicted on 14 counts, sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Sheriff Palmer's widow tried to sue for wrongful death, but the case was dismissed when evidence surfaced that he'd been reaching for his weapon when shot. Judge Morrison resigned before formal charges could be filed, disappeared east somewhere. 3 other officials connected to Vane's network were arrested, tried, convicted. The valley's power structure didn't just shift, it shattered and reformed into something newer, hopefully cleaner. The new sheriff, a former cavalry officer named Torres, actually investigated crimes instead of collecting bribes. Property disputes got settled by law instead of intimidation. Slowly, painfully, the machinery of justice started functioning the way it was supposed to. Mara's ranch thrived in ways it never had when Tom was alive, though she felt guilty thinking it. The alliance they'd built during the crisis remained strong, ranchers helping each other, sharing resources, standing together against whatever came. The land itself seemed to respond, grass growing thicker, cattle multiplying, water flowing clean and abundant through channels they'd fought so hard to protect. And Rhett stayed. He never made it official, never proposed or asked to put his name on anything, just kept working, kept building, kept being there in the morning and at night and all the hours between. His past remained mostly unspoken. Mara knew pieces, guessed at others, but didn't push. Whatever he'd been before mattered less than who he was now. A year after the trial, on a spring morning that felt too perfect to be real, Mara found him on the hill by Tom's grave, the completed bird carving placed carefully on the headstone. Thought he should have it, Rhett said when she approached. Man who built this place, defended it till his last breath. Seems right. Mara picked up the carving, studied the delicate wings, the careful detail. He would have liked you, Tom. You would have fought constantly about how to do everything, but he would have respected you. You think? I know. She set the bird back down, positioned it so it faced east toward the rising sun. I've been thinking about the future, about what we're building here. And I don't want to do it alone anymore. She turned to face him. I'm not asking you to be Tom. I'm not asking you to replace anything, but I am asking if you want to build something new. Together. Actually together, not just working the same land. Rhett looked at her, and she saw the war in his expression, the desire to run fighting against the desire to stay, the fear of being hurt fighting against the possibility of being healed. I'm still a mess, he said quietly. Still wake up some nights thinking I'm somewhere else. Still got skills I wish I didn't have and memories I can't escape. I know. I've got my own mess, my own ghosts. She took his hand. But maybe 2 broken people can build something stronger than either could alone. Maybe that's the whole point. You sure about this? About me? I'm sure I want to try. That's the best certainty I can offer. She squeezed his hand. What do you say? Rhett looked down at their joined hands, then at the valley spread out below, then at Tom's grave with its carved bird forever taking flight. I say yes, to trying, to staying, to whatever this becomes. Good, Mara smiled, because I already started planning where we'd expand the cattle operation, and I'm going to need your help. He laughed, surprised and genuine. Of course you did. They married quietly 2 months later, just family and the ranchers who'd fought beside them. No fancy ceremony, no expensive rings, just promises made in front of people who understood that commitment meant standing together when everything tried to tear you apart. The years that followed weren't easy. Drought came one summer, killing half their herd. A harsh winter the next year nearly broke them. Rhett's past surfaced once when a former colleague recognized him in town, leading to questions and tension until the man understood Rhett wasn't the person he'd been. Mara had nights where grief for Tom hit so hard she couldn't breathe, where the guilt of moving forward felt like betrayal. But they endured. They built systems that caught water for dry years. They diversified beyond cattle. They trained the next generation of ranchers in the lessons they'd learned about standing together. The alliance they'd forged in crisis became permanent, formalized into a cooperative that gave small ranchers the collective power to negotiate, to survive, to thrive. 5 years after Vane's conviction, on a summer evening with fireflies just starting to emerge, Mara and Rhett sat on the porch of the house they'd built together. Their house now, no qualifiers, no ghosts. 2 horses grazed in the field. Cattle dotted the hillside. The land stretched out healthy and whole. You ever regret it? Rhett asked. Fighting instead of taking Vane's money and running? Sometimes. When things get hard. Mara leaned against him, but mostly no, because running would have meant becoming someone I couldn't live with. At least this way I can look at myself in the mirror. That's worth something. That's worth everything. She watched the sun touch the horizon, painting the valley gold. We're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. But we're here. We're standing. And the land is ours. Nobody took it. Nobody broke us. You sound like you're trying to convince yourself. Maybe I am. Maybe that's what survival looks like. Convincing yourself every day that staying was worth it, that fighting was right, that the cost wasn't too high. She turned to look at him. Do you regret staying? Rhett was quiet for a moment, the question hanging between them. Then, no. This is the first place in years that feels like something more than just another stop. It feels like... He struggled for the word. Home, Mara finished. Yeah, home. He said it like testing out a foreign language, uncertain but willing to learn. They sat in silence as darkness fell, watching their land settle into night. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes called. The wind moved through grass they'd fought to keep, over water rights they'd nearly died defending, across territory that had tried to crush them and failed. The frontier had a way of breaking people, of grinding them down until surrender seemed like the only option. But it also had a way of forging something harder in those who refused to break. A stubborn resilience, a community born from shared struggle, a refusal to let power define right. They'd learned that justice wasn't something handed down by authorities or guaranteed by law. It was something you built through action, defended through sacrifice, protected through the simple act of standing together when standing alone meant falling. They'd learned that survival wasn't about being stronger or richer or better connected. It was about being willing to fight for what mattered, even when the odds were terrible. They'd learned that home wasn't a place you found. It was something you made, often in the worst circumstances, usually with broken people just trying to do better than they had before. And they'd learned that love, real love, the kind that lasted, wasn't about perfection. It was about 2 damaged people choosing each other despite the scars, building something new from the wreckage of what came before, refusing to give up even when every reason existed to walk away. The Montana wind whispered through the valley, carrying the smell of grass and distance and possibility. On the hill, Tom's grave kept its silent watch beneath the cottonwood, the carved bird still positioned toward the rising sun. In town, Vane sat in a prison cell, his empire dissolved, his name a warning instead of a weapon. And on a ranch that had survived everything thrown at it, 2 people sat together in the gathering dark, scarred but standing, broken but healing, alone but together. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was theirs. And out here, on land that didn't care about your plans or your pain, that had to be enough.